Homeland and Ablat Gemara. We are up to the Ayin Gimel, the 2.6 lines at the top, and I'll bring you up to speed where we're up to here. So we brought in a machlekes between Abaye and Rav, a very fundamental machlekes regarding the concept of Eid Zaymin. Eidim that were found to be liars, not necessarily lying about the actual story that occurred, but lying about their being present there. So we believe the second group that who says the first group, you weren't there at the time, you were with us somewhere else. And the question is, okay, so the first group is disqualified. Is it retrospective from the time they gave the testimony, or does it only take effect from the time they stood in Bezin, they were caught out to be liars? So Abaye says from the time they get testimony, because they've proven that they've given false testimony back then. So therefore, that's Abaye. And Rava says it's a chiddush. And because the whole thing is a chiddush, we cannot expand the parameters of a chiddush. We have to follow what the Torah says. From now on, you are puzzled. In fact, there's a very interesting machlekes rishonim. What happens if they said only half? They said, you were not there. That Sunday that you said Reuben killed Shimon, you were not there. But they don't say Imon Nuha, you said you were with us somewhere else. They just say half of that statement. You were not there. Is that considered Eid Zaymin or not? In other words, is that considered as if they're contradicting the testimony, or they're attacking them personally? Is that Chosh or that Hazam? Exactly. Because when they say Imono Yisem, you guys didn't talk about who you were with and whatever it is. So therefore we say that, okay, so quickly said Abaye has a logic to it. We gave different explanations, understanding the argument in Abaye and Rava yesterday. But bottom line is, Abaye said it's a logical thing that, that we believe the second group, because the second group is not contesting the testimony. So that's as if to say we don't know which way to go, Akasha, that they're contradicting each other and we just throw it out. No, they are attacking the agent personally. They said, we don't know about the testimony. You were disqualified, exactly. You were not there. You were with us. And the agent can no longer defend themselves because they're in a gay bedover. So that's a logical thing. We believe the second group, and therefore it should be retrospective. However, Rava says no, that it's a chiddush, the whole idea. And the reason why Rava says a chiddush, we gave one of the explanations why Rava says a chiddush is because when they said that we saw Reuben kill Shimon, let's say in Melbourne on a Sunday, it's tantamount to them saying that we were there. So that's part of their evidence. So when the second group says you were not there, you were with us, you're actually contesting a part of the evidence. So therefore, it's hakosha, not hazama. And the Torah yet nevertheless says you believe the second group. That's a chiddush. If they would, you're right, but it's a subtle, but it's not. You're right, but it wasn't. That's not what they said in the testimony. That's something that it's nuanced, and that's obvious, but it wasn't part of the testimony. So therefore, how do we view that part? Others say that the Rav agrees in principle with Abaye, but the chiddush is that we punish the first group, not that we don't believe them. The chiddush, we punish the first group. Bottom line is, according to Abaye, is l'mafreya hunipsul, and according to Rav, it's v'kanel haba. And these are the 6 exceptions that we pass like Abaye and Yahal Kagam. So now we're going to ask a few questions on this machlekes of Abaye and Rav. Says the Gemara Tanan. So Ayin Gimel 7 lines on the top of the page. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. So somebody steals a ganef and he's caught out. He has to pay not just the principal, the kedem, he also has to pay the penalty of the kefim. Then if he goes ahead and shechts or he sells the animal, then he has to pay. If it's a shoyd or a tzayin, he has to pay 4 or 5 times, depending what the animal was. So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. Gone about Bishnayim. 2 Adim came along and said this guy was a ganif and therefore there's a penalty. And then they say that Tovach Umachar Alpin. The same 2 Adim said, and then he proceeded to go ahead and shecht and to sell. The Nimtzu Zaymin comes out that these Adim were liars. The din is kasha zaman. We penalize them that they have to pay everything that they wanted to charge this innocent victim. They have to pay themselves. So obviously they have to pay 4 or 5 times whatever they wanted this person to do. Now, what actually happened here? We're understanding now what's the breakdown of the story. L'chayda didn't steal it and shecht it straight away. It's 2 different events. One event is he stole it. One event is he shechted it. So the Adim will come along and say, Sunday he stole it. And then a separate Adim will say, but on Monday we saw him sell it. On Monday we saw him, he shechted it. 2 separate Adim. And then you tell me they were found liars. The pashtas, each separate Adim, they were found liars separately. So they were found liars separately on the Tzvicha Mechida. They were found liars on the Gneva part. So let's understand what happened here, because if we're going to follow the theory of Abaye, that Eid Zaymin Lemafreya, which means that it's retrospective, that we disqualify, these Eidim now become ineligible from the time they said Eidis. In other words, in Nisan they said that Eidis so and so and so. In the month of the year, they were caught out. Two Adim came along and said, hey, Bob Mai says you were with us. What happens to all the evidence that they gave between the time that they gave the Adas in the court in the beginning of Nisan and Ear when they were found liars? So according to Baya, they were ineligible Adas. Everything that he signed, all the documents, are useless because they're partial Adas. And the Rabbi says, Mekanal Haba, it's Mishaz because of Chiddush. So let's look at our Mishnah here. You're saying that these Adim have to pay 4 or 5 times. So we're understanding the Mishnah as follows. My love, She'idu ala Gneva, there were 2 separate Adim in there. First, they came along and said the guy stole. Then the Chaz of Yidu ala Tzvich, so then they came along and said the guy did Tzvich Mechin. 2 separate Adim. Then, L'cheda, the sequence of events are, first they were caught out lying on the Gneva part, and then they were caught out lying on the Tzvich part. And the Mishnah says, so they were caught out, lying, they have to pay all the penalties. But let's think for a second. If it's the Mafreya Goiva, so it's not great. Mafreya unifsel. So as soon as they were caught out lying on the Gneva part, which was the first thing they were caught out lying, then if you go retrospective, that means when they went to court the next day and talked about Tzvicha Mechida, there was no Eidos here. They were ineligible Eidim. The same Eidim. Right now we're learning the same Eidim. Same Eidim. But when they came the second day, they were proven to be ineligible. If the apostle Eidos, then there's no Eidos. No Eidos. Why pay? There's nothing to talk about here. The moment you establish that they're ineligible. So the first Eidim, they were caught lying. They were eligible Eidim when they came to court and said they're eligible, but they were caught lying. The second Eidim, they were ineligible, the apostle Eidim. So where's the Dal V'Hei come in? Ready Gemara. If you follow Abaya, if you learn like Robin and Mekandla Haba, so it doesn't matter what happened then. They were kosher Eidim at the time when they said, the Gneva at the time they said, they were kosher Eidim. Now we penalize them, we can never trust them again. That's from now on. Says the Gemara. So my lab, but who's more like neighbor? Now, so that's retrospective. Hani. So this Adim, even the Zamalu, once they were caught lying on a neighbor, so that tells us from retrospectively when they gave Edis on the Tvicha, they were already possible, ineligible. Why are we making them pay? Kasha Zomam on the Tvicha when there's no Edis. In fact, we know that Din Edim Zayman is that you need Edim. There had to be Edim, proper Edim, and the Bezin had to make a psak din based on that testimony, and only then, if they were found liars, that's happening. So it has to go through the proper process of a Bezin. That these people were possible Edis. Just because we didn't know, we accepted Edis doesn't change anything. So how's the going to deal with that? Says the Gemara, who told you the sequence of events was that first they were caught out lying on the Gneva, and then they were caught out lying on the Tvicha? Maybe it was the other way around. They were caught out lying on the Tvicha first. So even though they said first Gneva, then it said Tvicha. But then a group of 80 came in and said, the Tvicha on Monday, you were with us elsewhere. And then another group came in following day and said, and the Gneva, you were with us. So therefore, when the Tvicha, we go back to Mafreya to the Tvicha part, but the Gneva part was still the valid Edis. So therefore, they have to pay the whole thing. So the Gemara, no, they weren't possible Edis when they testified on the Tvicha, because they didn't. The eligibility only started after the Edis of the Tvicha. Who's more on the Tvicha? First, they were found liars on the Tvicha, and so on. It doesn't make sense. Why? So what happened? So Tuesday, the agent came in and said, you were lying about Tvicha, you were with us. And on Wednesday, the agent came in and said, you were lying about the Gneva with us. But if it's retrospective, it doesn't matter that the Edis for the lying of Gneva was a day later, but it's retrospective. So when does it go back to? We say now these were postulators. Going back to when? From the moment they said that it was stolen, they were liars. So the pilot, when they went to court the following day to testify that these people, that this guy here not only stole it, but they were already postulators. Because remember, everything's retrospective. It doesn't matter how many months later Adam Zayman come in and say, Zayman come in and say these guys are Adam Zayman. It doesn't matter how many months later. It's retrospective. Back to when? Back to when they gave that false testimony. The fact is, the testimony that these Adam gave for Gneva was before the testimony they gave for Tvicha. The testimony for Tvicha is meaningless unless the guy stole the animal first. So first they established the guy stole the animal. So Sunday they said the guy stole the animal. Monday they came in and said the guy shechted the animal. Tuesday, Aiden came in and said, oh, they did shechted, you were with him? No, you weren't. You were with us somewhere else. Wednesday, they came in, another group came in, the same group came in and said, but you were with us Sunday. You said, you were with us Sunday, somewhere else. Which means if you go retrospective, Lepoil, when did now this Aiden become Aiden Zayman? From Sunday, from the moment they went to bed. So Lepoil, when they went Monday and they came to the court and said, hey, this guy shechted the animal, they were postulatus. So why are you punishing them for the Tvicha Mechida?
The first place to say, you're wrong.
Again, there's one group of agents. Okay, so Sunday they came in and said Reuben stole a cow. We saw with our own eyes Reuben steal a cow. Monday they came in and said, and we saw that on Monday Reuben took this cow and shechted it. So now it's two separate stories. On Tuesday, a group of 80 came in and said, you said you saw him shechting yesterday on Monday. You were with us. On Wednesday, a group of 80 came in and said, you saw him steal it on Sunday. You were with us. So the poil, if it's mafrei, I don't care the sequence of the hazama. The poil is mafrei, goes back to Sunday. That means this guy already on Sunday were lying. So when they came in Monday to testify by the tzicha, they were postulatus. Yeah, the same age.
So it's the same when they Zayim came and said on yeah, they said that those you weren't there. They already became Ekel Zayim and everything.
Not every time like that, because there's two separate ages.
No, it's not.
Even though it's the same agent, but they came in twice to Bezin.
I understand, but
so if they only knocked them back on the Tzricha Mechida, it has no impact on the Gneba. So the Gneba will still believe them. Remember, the Tzricha Mechida was after the Gneba, so the Gneba will believe them, and this Ganav will have to pay the kefil. But the Tzricha Mechida, we don't believe them, and the agent have to pay. So now the second group came in and said that you guys also are liars when it comes to Gneba. So the Mafreya, they were liars from day one. That means the Aedis to court when it came for Tzricha Mechida was not real Aedis. So why are we put it? It never existed. So why is the Hazama coming? That's the most thing. So we still understand about how does he understand the mission? Talking about safe. Ultimately, when later on they were found out to be liars, also when it came to the Gneva, it reveals to us that he has had when they came into court to testify about Tzricha, the apostle. So the question is, why did they pay for the Tzricha? Answer the Gemara. How's a buy in learn pshat? Your premise is that the one group of agents came with two separate agents. They came at the same time. They came to court and says, Reuven on Sunday stole an animal and he shechted it. It was one aegis. And because it was one aegis, the hilchot, so therefore there's no lemafreya. That was the first aegis they say they become puzzle after that aegis. So the first aegis said is acceptable. You came in, you did at that moment when you came in and gave your testimony, you were kosher aegis. So whatever he said is kosher. Then the Torah said, oh, Hazama will believe the second pair. That's it then. But because you put both aegis together in one go, the Gneba and the Tzricha Mechida, it's one aegis. So therefore, when we're mazim, and Rashi says you're mazim first on the Tzricha, and then you were mazim. The Hilchos, the Gemara's answer is they testified in one go, and then v'huzmu. And Rashi deletes the words b'vasachas. Huzmu. The mazim doesn't matter if there's two separate hazamas. You gave one aegis, stealing and shechting. And then another group of agents, the Mazimi came in and said that the Tzricha Mechila, you were not there. And then another group of agents come in and say the Geneva, you were not there. So therefore, the original agent have to pay everything. And Rashi says, but it has to be that particular order. First, it has to be the agent come in to reject the Tzricha, and then the agent come in and reject the Geneva. And why is that? Rashi doesn't explain why. Tracer doesn't like it, and Tracer therefore puts in the Vasachat. But Rashi, the reason why, what the Mepharshim say is, Rashi is saying very simple. If we are going to first reject the Geneva, then he no longer pays Dal V'Hei, even if you found him a liar. Because how do you get to Dal V'Hei? Where Dal V'Hei? You pay the Kedem, the principal, you pay the Kefil, and then you add another layer of 2 or 3 times for 12 ways. Yeah, but if once we exempt him from, we take out the Kefil part and the Kedem part, there's no Dal V'Hei anymore. So even if they're saying the truth, there's no Geneva, there's no Tzricha Mechida here. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So that's how we explain the Mishnah Kod Rabbi. Talking about it further, in fact, this machlekes Rabbi and Rava seems to be machlekes Tanaim. Now it's not open in this brayso, but that's the only way to explain it. More thinks. Like it goes as follows. 280 came in and said the guy's a ganef. And they themselves say that he also shechted it. The huzmu al hagneva. They were caught lying on the Geneva. If they were caught lying on the Geneva, we just said right now that since the ages falls apart, exactly. Once falls on the Geneva, There's no longer any edus for the because there's one edus. Same Edom. Which means that these Edom have to pay now kefil because they lied about it, but no one pays the alleged Ganav doesn't pay the base gibel because you don't know things base gibel. You only pay dal v'hei, but part of the dal v'hei is the kefil, and since the whole Edom falls apart, there's nothing left. Yeah. And because he didn't steal, what's he going to? So if he shechted an animal that he didn't steal, why should he pay? What's the penalty all about? So even if they were found liars later on the hazama on the tvicha, they don't have to pay. The agent don't have to pay anything extra because the whole age is fall apart. Okay, what about huzmu ala tvicha? What happened if they only found liars on the tvicha part, not the gneva part, which means that the guy Taka was a ganef, but he just didn't shecht it. Then who mishal tashlim kefil? Then the guy, the ganef who was found to be a ganef pays double. The hey mishal mishal and they pay they are liars about the tvicha part, so they pay that penalty. Omar Rabbi Yosef, here's what along it says. When do we say we break it up this way? Only two separate edus. Now, when do we say that this edus pays the kefil and this guy that the guy that pays the kefil and the edus pay for the tvicha mechida? Only if it's two separate edus. Now we're not sure what two separate edus mean. Does it mean two separate times in bezin? I don't care if it's one group of edim or two separate groups of edim. That's what we're going to try and analyze. But if it's one edus. Then edus shabbat mitzvah kula. If it's one edus, then once one part is bottled, the other part is bottled as well. Even if you first attack the tzvicha mechira part, the whole thing falls apart. So I'm going to ask, my bishta edus, my what does it mean? Two edus and one edus. You're telling me that if it's one edus and they were found liars on the tzvicha part, the whole thing falls apart. Let's understand. What does that mean? Means two different groups of edim. One group came in and said you got it. One group said you shechted it. Then means two separate groups, and means and one group. So the chilik is pasha how many groups? Two groups in one group. Then even they said the edus separately. No, but first the one group. No, you're telling me that the chilik is two groups in one group. But they're very similar. So the one group also broke it up into two different edison. But if it's one group, on Sunday they say the guy ganvit, on Monday they say the guy did tvicha chiddush. Since it's one group, edus shabatul mitzasa batul kula. If they come, if they split the edus, is kimisadi agneva v'hadim misadi tvicha. That if they first testify by the gneva, and then they testified by the tvicha, and then kimizami tvicha, and the Rabbi Yossi is saying that they were found to be lies on the tvicha, that edus shabatul mitzasa batul kula. Why? Where do I know that from? Why should it be? If it's two separate edison, the second edis that were found to be liars, but the first edis that weren't, so the first edis should still stand in court, and the ganef should be a ganef. Declare the ganef, and he should pay double. So what does it mean? Must be that both cases are talking about Rabbi Yossi talking about one group of agents. The chiluk between shtei edis and edis achas is if they gave it over, they broke up the two edis as two testimonies or one testimony. And it goes as follows. We're talking about one group, but they're behaving like two different groups. What do you mean? One group. If one group says on Sunday that he stole, and on Monday he shechted, then it's two separate edison, and we've caught that lying here, but the other one is still good, intact. But what Rabbi Yossi is saying, the edus achas means they gave one testimony. Came in on a Sunday and they said he got it and he stole and he shechted. Everyone holds that even though you can't say it all together, you said he got it, and then you said and he shechted, even though it's two separate stories, right? But it's considered one edus because it's toich kedei dibur, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And so what's the machlekes then? So Rabbi Yossi says that since it's one edus and part of it is been demolished, part of it proven incorrect, and the whole thing falls away. So what's the machlekes? So my laba hakamivli. The Rabbanan say mikano lahabon so that when you say edim, when do you become a liar? From now on. So therefore, the part that you caught a lying, you're lying, and the part that you weren't caught lying, you're not lying. So you're lying at tzvicha mechida, okay. Therefore, you have to pay that penalty. But you weren't lying on when you came to court. You weren't lying on the Geneva part. So the Geneva stands. Since according to Rava, when does the hazama? When do you lose your credibility? Right this minute. So therefore, what did we find you were lying at? Atvich, or Gneva. The lame is a Malaysia, but not on the Gneva part. So that Edus he gave a month ago still stands. And Rabbi Yossi holds like a Baye, the Mafreya, and it's retrospective. Now that we've established that you are a liar when it comes to Tvicha, and since the Tvicha and the Gneva was one Edus, and Dami, so it's retrospective. That means you were lying already back then when you gave that Edus. You're ineligible. So therefore, you're also the first part is also ineligible. The kivon the miyad kiasidu who the mitzvah as soon as you gave the apostle is kizamelu atvichi zamelu nami yagneva. It's all one Edus, solely falls apart. So Dami. That's what the Shomar says. Abai Rav is machlekes tonight. Says the Gemara, Amri, I can tell you, no. I can tell you that if then Kuli Alma Mafrei Nifsu. Everyone agrees to Abai Mafrei. So what's the machlekes? How can the Rabbanan say that whatever he was caught lying, he's lying, and what he wasn't, he wasn't? That goof is the machlekes. If Toich Kedibur is Kedibur Dami, Kamiflagi. The Rabbanan saw the Rabbanan hold Toich Kedibur Lav Kedibur Dami. Here we have a day that says that Toich Kedibur not. And therefore they say that even if though it's a mafreya, you said Geneva, and then you said it's two separate statements, even though you connected them, but doesn't. It's two separate stories. And therefore, the mafreya only goes back to this statement, and that's why you became a liar after you talked about the Geneva. The Geneva part is still your kosher edus. But Abiyasi Sava, Turkey kid dibadami. So Abiyasi hold the Turkey is like dibadami, and therefore, what do you call Geneva as well is part of the same ages as the Tvicha, and you've proven that you've been a liar all along. So everyone can hold like a buy. And why we say that? Because Allah is like a buy. Sorry. Yeah?
We say if we say that Kedibur is Kedibur, and then we say
no, if you take it like your premises, and everyone holds like a buyer. Because Allah is like a buyer. So what's the machlekes Rabban Abiyasi here? So we're explaining whether take it is Kedibur, whether it's one ages or two ages. So now the Gemara will talk about Teikah Dibur, which is very interesting. It says the Gemara here, Savar, you're going to tell me that Yesi host. Again, this is amazing about the Gemara. Why, if you want to know the subject of Teikah Dibur, you wouldn't think of looking Bava Kama. We have in a few places in the shop. We have in the Dorim, the whole thing about Teikah Dibur. That's really where the halachas are, and we have a little bit of brachas. But middle Bava Kama. That's why we have to go through the whole shas because we point out so many times the Rambam when he wrote the Rambam. He writes in a letter, he had one regret. He didn't put Mar Mekaymis because he writes it that the Chachmei Chelm wrote him a certain thing about the Tzichr. Where did you get this halacha from? So we told him go look for places in Sanhedrin. A few months later, he wrote him a letter, went through a whole Sanhedrin, the whole city went through it, back with the word, we can't find it. So he gave them another Masechta and another, about 5 or 6 Masechtas. And he came back each time and said, we can't find it. And then he remembered it was in Yavamas, it was part of a Shakla Vatari, and there was one line question there. From that question, he came to Zalach. He writes that he has Charata, because Shas doesn't work that way. You can't say, oh, well, the Indian is here. And that, look, because, every Indian has one line, you have to go somewhere else to find it. And we pointed out all the time, as we learn, in Yonah that are totally outside, like Hilchos Shabbos, the big Machli you say in Shabbos, and Hilchos Shabbos, Chagiga, and other places. Just very interesting. Okay. Like Eidim Zaymim, the Sugis and Makkis, the Sugis and Hedron, and here we have the whole Machlekes and Mafreya. This is what you say, Machlekes, and it's here in Bava Kama. Anyway, so you might further. So this Teikah Dibur, very interesting Machlekes here. Saying about Rabbi Yossi, so the Rabban don't believe in Teikah Dibur, and Rabbi Yossi does. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi holds Teikah Dibur, but now we learned a number of times already. Hareizu Tmuras Oila Tmuras Shlamim. If a person says, I want this animal to be in exchange for an Oila, which means it gets totally burned in Mizbech, I want this animal to be in exchange for a Shlamim, the same animal. So what do? Because Shlamim is very different. Shlamim you eat 2 days and a night, and Oila gets totally burned in Mizbech. So what do you do with this animal? And by Tmuras the Hayahu, Tmuras the Yakedesh. So what do? Hareizu Tmuras Oila. You remember, I said you twice Lashon edition. You take the first words he said Oila first, and that's it. It's Oila. Rabbi Yossi says it depends. If he intended that what it should be taka oil and a shlam, he wanted both, like half. And then how does he do that? He waits till the animal has a mum, he sells it, and then with the money he buys half the money he buys an oil, and half the money he buys another animal. If that's what he intended, then it's possible to say both words at the same time coming out of your mouth. So you don't say twice less tradition. This is what he wanted all along. If he first said oila, then v'nimlach, he changed his mind, he changed his heart. But Amar, and he said Tamura Shlamim, Then we say, you can't change your mind. You cannot change your mind. Once you said that it's a shlam, it's a shlam. Or once said it's an oil, it's an oil. Says the Gemara, when we ask, Nimluch, if he changes his mind, what's Rabbi Yosef's chiddush? And nobody argues. What's he trying to say? Pshita. If you said that there should be a chalois of Hegish, and then you change your mind, it's ready to but the Papa says, you know what's going on here? Nimlich b'toich kedediba kamerinen. You change your mind within a short gap, within the time of toich kedediba. We've seen a minute what toich kedediba is, and that's the machlekes. Rabbi Yossi says that it's nimlich. In the Tanna Kama says too late. Once it said it's a tmuras. And Rabbi Yossi says that if it's a very short, if it's a toich kedediba but too long, it's fafal, and that's his nimlich fafal. So our question is going to be: you just said that Rabbi Yossi holds that here we see you can. Rabbi Yossi says im nimlich, and you change your mind in how long? It's been a long time. Doesn't talk about. You change your mind in a very short space of time. And Rabbi Yossi says fafal. Once he said in that case nimlich, you can't do it anymore. So what does he clear from here? Rabbi Yossi does not believe in the whole concept of Toich. So what are you telling me that before that the machlekes over here by Hazama is whether Toich Kedibur or not, and Rabbi Yossi holds that it's Kedibur, which clearly says it doesn't. So what answers Amri Trei Toich Kedibur have. You should know there are two kinds of Toich Kedibur, and that is as follows: Chad Kedei Sheilas Talmud Rab, the time it takes for a student to say Shalom Aleichem to his Rebbe. And the chad and more clear. The chad kidei shilas alav tamid. The other one is the time it takes for a rebbe to greet his student. Key less leila Rabbi Yossi. When Rabbi Yossi says fafal, you cannot change your mind anymore when it's too long. Kidei shilas tamid rab. Shalom alecha rebbe yomeiri. 4 words. That's too long already. It's considered already too long of a gap. The cooling off period is too long, and you change your mind. You can't change your mind anymore. The nafish, too long. But Kedei Sheilas Rav the Talmud, the time it takes for Rav to say hello to his student. Shalom Alecha, just 2 words, Islay. He holds Teichedi with Rabbi. So here we have in the Gemara here, we also have in this morning, but here we have in the Gemara here that there's 2 kinds of Teichedi. Shalom Alecha, you definitely keep changing your mind. Shalom Alecha, Rabbi Mighty can. So Teichedi asks here a question. Throughout Shas, we always say Teichedi Kedibur. Comes out from the Gemara here. The Chachamim don't believe in Toich Kedibur at all. Rabbi Yossi holds it only works if you have 2 words Shalom Alecha, and yet throughout Shas it's always Shalom Alecha Rebbe, Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Yomeiri, or Rebbe. What's going on here? So Teja said there's a third opinion which is not brought down in this Gemara. The Rabbanan from a few places in the Shas where they believe in Toich Kedibur. So other Farshim find it a little bit hard because this is the sugi of Toich Kedibur, and suddenly you find there's a third opinion who Bechlal doesn't believe in any of these limitations. You notice it says here Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Umaydi. Most Gemaras when we talk about Toich Kedibur, it says Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. It doesn't say Umaydi. So what's that? So there are actually 3, and not only that. Rabbi Yossi, what's he going to say? He doesn't believe in Toich Kedibur if it's Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Umaydi, but he does believe in Toich Kedibur when he says Shalom Aleichem. What about in between? Shalom Aleichem Rebbe without the Maydi. 4 words is too much. 2 words is good. And what about 3 words? So they want to say that is what we're saying here. That Rabbi Yossi holds that 3 words is good enough. When is it no good? When it's 4 words. That's why throughout Shas you don't find Rebbe Yomeiri. In fact, here it says aside, take it off. Don't take it off. It says inside here that the Rosh is not good. So they say don't take it off. Leave the word mighty here. When does Rabbi? There's no 3 opinions. There's only 2 opinions. Rabbi Yossi says that 4 words is too long. Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Yomeiri or Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Yomeiri. That's too many words. Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, that's Toich Kedibur. The chiddush of here is that Rabbi Yossi saying that even 2 words, the Rabbanan say, who argue Rabbi Yossi, that's too much of a gap, and you can't change your mind anymore. So the 2 words here is chosen not for the chiddush of Rabbi Yossi, because he holds even 3 words you can change your mind. It's the Rabbanan, not even 2 words you cannot. So there are only 2 opinions. The bottom line is you'll always see, in even Shulchan Aruch, that's Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. It doesn't say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, Yomeiri, it says Rebbe. And that's why they all say cut it off. But they say no, don't cut it off. That's the point. They say the Rosh doesn't have the word mighty. But the first say don't cut it off, because that's when less late. Rosh will learn lactation. There's another opinion somewhere that says that, it's still good enough. Why the whole idea of Toich Kedibur, big machlekes Rishonim, what's that all about? So if you remember in the Dorim, we had the Ran, the end of the Ran says there, this Mahatayda. The halach is take it even divdom. It's mahatayda. Why is it mahatayda? When a person goes into a deal, you want to have a few seconds that you can think about it. You want a cooling off period. Here it's a cooling period of 3 days, I think. There it's like 3 seconds. That's the whole cooling, but you want a little bit. So the chatchila is as if you made a tanai, and since everybody does it, so it's accepted. As if it's made a tanai that I don't want the deal to be cemented, to be concluded until I have a few seconds to breathe and to think about it. So it's mahatayda. And therefore, the Ran says the same thing applies to that's why it applies also to kriya. It says if you did kriya and then take a you heard that someone else in the family passed away, that's good enough. Because take it even like people, whenever they do something, they want to have a few more seconds before they say I finished. So it's not like you finished, you continue a little bit more. Bein Tam says it's only midrabanan. It's a special takana midrabanan, and the takana is in case your Rebbe does walk by, you're in the middle of doing a big business deal and your Rebbe walks by, and you have to have that chedes for your Rebbe. So we want to give you that opportunity to say Shalom Aleichem. But you're scared to Shalom Aleichem because the deal might close and you didn't have a chance to digest it. So it's made a special takana to give you a few seconds so you can say hello to your Rebbe before you finish your deal over here. That's what the main time says. Then the main time the Teza says, the main time is a bit difficult to understand. So what about Kriya? Do we say that if it's Teike Dibur, you can continue? What does that have to do with anything? But the Gemara concludes there are 4 exceptions. Avodah Zorah, Megadef, if you're, what do you call it? Heresy, and Kedushin and Gedushin. Those 4 things, you cannot change your mind. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, it makes sense. We're not going to make a special takana. These are so serious. We're not going to make a takana to stop the Teda. The Teda says the Kedushin is Chal, and it's Chal, or Gedushin is Chal. According to the Ran, you're going to have to say that the Ran himself says so. That you're going to have to say that in these 4 cases, it's so serious, it's so grave that a person b'shas is doing it already in his mind made up. I'm not changing my mind. So exactly. So if you do what are these things? This is what you have in mind. Okay, let's continue more. Amar Rav says Rava. Talking about Hazama, we continue now with another subject. Rava said the following. Eidim shehukhshu ulabasayv huzmu. There were 3 pairs of Eidim, Group A, Group B, Group C. Group A came in and said Reuben killed Shimon on a Sunday. Group B comes in and says never happened. Reuben never killed Shimon. So that's Eida HaChasha. What happened to HaChasha? We throw the whole thing out. Then Group C comes in and says to Group A, how can you say that Reuben killed Shimon? You were with us somewhere else. So the question that follows. Since Group C came in after Group B and Group B already knocked out Group A, there's no one to be Mazen. Who are the being Mazen? There's no Eidus anymore because we knocked them out. So one opinion says you're right. The Abaya holds Hakosha lav tchilas hazamhi. Hakosha is nothing to do with hazama. That means once we throw the testimony out, comes Group C on Tuesday and says Group A, hey, you weren't there. There is no Group A anymore. It's gone.
But we'll still the Group A still has in their money though.
So
they're not.
So what happens to Group A and Group B? We mentioned yesterday in Bava Kama Daf. What happens to Group A and Group B when there's Hakosha? So one of them says each of them has a cheskes kashas on their own. What you cannot do is take one from this group and one from this group in the future ages. And the other one says no, that now their credibility is in question. Is a suffix. We cannot anymore use them. So both groups, because we don't know who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. So Amar Rava says, Rava Eidim shehukhshu lebesayv huzmu. If you have Eidim that were contradicted and then they found liars, neragim. Rava says, I hold that Group C can still talk to Group A and say to Group A, you were a liar, you weren't there at the time. The Hakosha kills Hazami. Because Hakosha is the beginning of Hazama. In this case here, Hakosha is leading to Hazama. We're talking about your testimony. And therefore, they're still entitled to be Mazin the Group A. Elishal Nigma, you didn't complete the job. Amar Rabba, Minamingla. How do I know this? And tomorrow's Gemara will be a continuation of this thing here, which is quite that Halton Cup. Minamingla, how do I know this? From the following Braisa. It says there, Meidonu be ish ploini, where Group A comes along and says, and I'm testifying, Shesime es ein avda, that this person here blinded his Eved, which means now he's set free, Eved Kanani. So it means the Eved Kanani now goes free. And then the Hippolishin afterwards, when he's a free man, he knocked out his tooth. So he has to reimburse him for knocking out his tooth, which is not that much money, but that's what he has to do. Shahari Harav oy mekain. The Rav, the master, is happy with his testimony. The Gemara is going to quiz what that means. The Nimtzu Zaymin turned out to be that they were lying. So what did they want to do? They wanted to do things. They wanted to set the Eved free because they said you blinded him. And they wanted you should pay him money for his tooth. Mishalmin. So what did I say? They paid Dmei Ayin le'evid for trying to blind him. They pay the money for the eye to the evid. That's what the Bryce says, which doesn't make sense. They wanted to free the evid. If anything, they owe money to the master for trying to free it. Set the evid free when it's bubble mices. And then they try to get the master to. Okay, we'll see in a minute what happened here. Well, what's going on here? If you take the Bryce literally, the Leka Kata Charina, there's nobody else here but this first group who said that first you blinded him and then you broke his tooth. Why pay the money of the eye to the Evid? Bossa the Mafkele after they set him free, the Evid is a very happy person. You have to pay him the money for they have to pay what's up with it? So they have to pay the money for the eye. What are they paying the money for the eye? They help the Evid out. They set him free. They set the Evid free. They have to go pay the Evid. The Evid should be very gracious and express his gratitude. Boy, they make kuli Evid. What did they try to? They try to hurt the master, so they should pay for the full money to the master. But furthermore, the Bryce says, and the master is very happy with his testimony. What's so happy about? He's happy that he just lost his evidence. These guys came above Maisa that he. So what's going on here? Elalav says Rabbi. Must be three groups here. Group A, Group B, and Group C. Group C are the Mazimin, but there's a Group A and Group B. What do you mean? Lav, you're going to Oshabay today. Group A came along and said, this is the sequence of events. First he knocked out his tooth, and then Simas Einon. So when you knocked out his tooth, because we know Shen Ra'in, the Evid goes free, and Chavdal Devorim, so the Evid goes free for the tooth. And then you blinded him. So now you have to pay him for gouging out his eye. And that is very expensive. So they choose two things that this first group came along and said. First of all, you have to set him free. Second of all, you owe him a lot of money for the eye. Comes the boy so what they're asking is the master should give the money for the eye. But also came Group B, second group, and they say the same thing that he's free, but the sequence of events is forget. First you knocked out his eye, then you gouged his eye, and then you knocked out his tooth. So now the eye sets him free, and how much money do you owe him? Only for the tooth. Or you owe him money for the tooth. Right? So now, as far as going free is concerned, both sets of agents are saying the same thing. So the master makes no difference. Nobody hurt the master here, because regardless of whether he knocked out the eye first or whether he knocked out the tooth first or he gouged the eye, in both cases he goes free. So the master has no tightness to anybody. The boss. The evidence is the one being hurt here, because the one who says that he knocked out the tooth second is hurting the evidence, because he should have gotten money for the eye, not getting money for the tooth. And how much do the agents have to pay, by the way? The difference between the tooth and eye, not the full amount. The tooth would be $10 and the eye would be $200. It pays that difference. The only argument is behind, and that's what it means. The Rab is happy with the second group because all he has to pay is for a tooth. The Nichel might come. He's very happy with what they're saying. That's from the Bryce. And yet it says Tani, and it says there, it says there, what happens if they were found to be liars? It says that they have to pay money. Shall mean to may ayin le'evid. They have to pay the money for the eye to the evid. Now, there were two groups of Eidim there in the beginning, and they contradicted each other. If Hakosha is not part of Azama, then we knock out the whole Eidos. We don't know who's telling us the truth, who's not telling us the truth, so we knock out the whole Eidos. So why should they have to pay when the group C comes along and tries to mimazah them? Who are you talking to? There's nobody here. Must be the Hakosha Tchilas Azami. They said, was approved.